Just Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Yes, hello again. I'm Martin Ballard and welcome to episode 79 of this podcast series. And this time we're turning our attention to stage management and training.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
In the last episode, we looked in more detail at two of the most crucial areas of technology with theatre in general and pantomime in particular. We talked about lighting with lighting designer Matt Ladkin and sound with sound designer Mike Thacker. Now, if you missed that or any of the other previous episodes, you can still listen to them. And there are many more to come from one of the UK's biggest producers of pantomime and children's theatre. So make sure you subscribe where you normally get your podcasts. And don't forget, if you have any questions about Imagine Theatre or pantomime in general, send them in using the Get in Touch section of the website at imaginetheatre.co.uk and we'll answer another of your questions later on in this episode. So this time we're going to be looking in more detail at how to get into theatre and into stage management in particular, with two members of the Imagine team who have been through the training process quite recently. Ruth Porter is Deputy Head of Stage Management and Props, and Jazmyne Evans is Imagine's Operations and Production Administrator. How are you both?
Great,
good, thank
really
you.
good.
Well, let's start at the very beginning, shall we? I'll start with you, Jazz, because I wonder what came first for you. Was it an interest in theatre, performance? Was it at school? Where did it all start?
It all started actually with my first pantomime. My mum's always taken me to pantomime back home in Lincoln. My first pantomime was at the Lincoln Drill Hall of Peter Pan. And I just kind of remember the magic of seeing Peter Pan fly over the audience. And I was like, oh, this is a bit of me, really. Was never overly interested in the kind of performance side of it myself. Did a bit of GCSE drama. And as part of that, our training involved then doing a little bit of working out what kind of lights you'd use to create certain dramatic effects. And we started to kind of fiddle around with all of those at school. And I was like, this is more me. I love theatre, but I'm not quite there to be on the stage. So I had a little bit of a look around and found a college really local to me, which did production arts. And that kind of allowed me then to go and have a little bit of a delve into lighting, sound, stage management, design, and kind of through that I found that my calling, for want of a better word, was a deputy stage manager of calling the show, and that stage management section, it was very much suited to me and meant I could work within theatre.
Okay, well, let's just go back to that very first Peter Pan. What struck you about it, first of all? Because, you know, some people look at it and think, oh, it's amazing because there's so much going on. It's so bright, it's so colourful. It could be the slapstick, it could be the songs. What struck you about it?
For me, I really loved all of the audience kind of participation. The dame at the drill hall is absolutely incredible, really funny. Our Peter Pan and Wendy were people that I'd kind of already knew and grown up with. So again, seeing them doing all of that flying, all of the bright lights, all of the disco balls and the mirror balls everywhere. It's one of those things, it's a feast for the eyes, isn't it, panto? So yeah, that's where.
Yeah, and was it a family tradition to go every Christmas?
Absolutely, yeah. So it didn't really matter kind of which theatre. My mum would just say, do you want to see Aladdin or Sleeping Beauty? And we'd say which one we'd prefer that year. So we'd either be at the Lincoln Drill Hall or at the Lincoln Theatre Royal. But yeah, every year without fail, we would be at a pantomime. Usually the 28th of December, you know, that's Panto Day.
Yeah, it's a part of every family's Christmas, isn't it? What about you, Ruth? Where did it all start for you? Was it at school?
It was actually when I was about 5-ish. Originally I wanted to be on stage. I wanted to be like every 5-year-old, a prima ballerina. So I used to go watch a lot of ballets, and then every Christmas we would go see panto. So we would go either to the Belgrade Coventry, because I'm from Coventry, or we would go to the Abbey Theatre in Nuneaton, which is a little amateur group. And the one that I always remember was Robin Hood, and they had them like swinging down from the tree and stuff like that. And the reason we went to that one was because of my brother. So it actually all is because of my brother that I'm where I am. So he is an electrician on the side, but he used to go to theatre to the Abbey as a volunteer, as a sound guy, so he's a noise boy. I kind of was like, at school, I was like, I don't really want to do sixth form, I want to carry on, I want to maybe go into this backstage thing, because I was like, it's kind of fun, like I enjoy it, the aspect of it. the interest of it all. So I went to Stratford-upon-Avon College, did production arts like Jazz did. In my first year, they needed a stage manager, and somehow I got thrown into this role, and then every time I kept finding that every time there was a show I got thrown in as the stage manager. And the lecturer was like, why do you keep doing this? Like, I've got an interest in sound, why do you keep doing this? And she went, because you just naturally have an instinct for it. And then I kind of was like, oh, okay. And then I found my love for stage management and then props making as well from uni. So that's kind of how I got to where I am. But yeah, panto is like, I always remember every Christmas going, and there's always those certain routines and jokes that just stick out to you, like the ghost gag, classic, absolutely love it. Even now when I go to the panto, we're there, sat like in High Wycombe, like we're going as part of the company to watch these shows, and I'm sat there like joining in like I was a child again. So it's great. Every Christmas I get to relive my childhood.
Yeah, and what about that first panto again, Robin Hood? What sort of struck you about that panto?
It was just the fun they were having on stage. Like, for me, I enjoy panto. You can see them having fun on stage, and then that makes you as an audience member enjoy it yourself, because it's one of those things, when someone else is laughing, you laugh. And so then you felt really involved, because every time the comic comes on, it'll be like, hello everyone, and you felt like you were part of it and you were part of that world. You always left feeling that you had been part of something, which is always nice. I feel as a child you're more interested in staying in tune with what the show is if you've got someone going, hello everyone, and shouting, oh no he's not, oh yes he is, and that whole interaction, you feel like you're part of it. And if you feel you're part of it, it stays within your mind, because you go, oh yeah, do you remember that time that we were just shouting at random people who I'd never known before, just shouting at them, oh it's behind you? Like, you don't do that on a normal day.
So this was Ian Lachlan, was it, as Dame?
Yes, incredible. So I grew up with Ian as the tweenies, so seeing him then on stage and learning kind of as I got older that he was the one who created the tweenies. And then I actually got to work with him in 2021, which was just like crazy for me, because I was like, oh my word, I've met a childhood hero, the guy who wrote the tweenies, and I was really excited. But then when I was working with him, I was like, no, I have to be professional, like I need to keep the excitement in. But I would go home every day like, oh my gosh, like the first day I met him, I went home and I was like, guys, like I've just met the man who wrote tweenies. And yeah, it was just a childhood dream come true, that was.
So Jazz, in terms of looking at what you want to do after school, at what stage did you think, I'd kind of like to pursue this, get some training and then do it as a career?
I think for me it was the second show I did at college. So I did a production of Rent with my college group, and I loved it. Being able to see the start of a show, you just literally, you get the script and that's everything, and you watch that whole process, the blocking of it all, you watch all of the music calls, you then get the band involved, we then all turn up to the theatre and it's a blank black box space, and then you add a couple of lights into it, couple of pieces of set, and all of a sudden you're in New York kind of situation. It's just incredible. The whole tech process itself, I just felt was just so much fun. You start seeing the show come to life, and it was at that point when I was calling my first show of Rent that I was like, this is me, this is where I want to be, and this is now something I need to look at as a more serious route and not so much as a hobby anymore, and just for a bit of fun. Like, this is something I would like to pursue.
There's a lot more to it than most people who aren't involved in theatre understand. If you're calling the show particularly, so many, I mean, it's a multi-skilling job, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You've got so many things happening around you. Nothing happens unless you say go. You've also got the kind of pastoral care of all of your cast. You've got to make sure that the health and safety is being looked at, make sure there's nothing happening on stage that is too dangerous. You've got to have that really good set of skills that allow you to stay calm but focused and on top of everything that you need to be looking at, because you are in charge of lighting, you're in charge of sound, you're in charge of automation, you're in charge of people. There's so much to be looking out for as a deputy stage manager.
Hang on, it's a power thing, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was always told I was a bossy boots, and do you know what? That's absolutely what a DSM is.
What about you, Ruth? When did you make that decision? This is what I want to do, and then I'm going to get trained and do it professionally.
I actually got thrown into covering Alice in Wonderland as a show for an amateur group. They were like, oh yeah, we need someone just to cover this night. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'd never seen the show and going into it and doing it. And when I was there with all these sound faders because I was at the sound desk. And I just remember at the end of the show, I was like, in the middle of it, because you really know, there's always that thing, no matter what role you're in, even if you're on stage, backstage, you always get nervous. I don't know if you have it, Jazz, but you always get this moment before and you go, okay, I need to just get in the zone and just do it. As you're doing it, your mind takes over and you just do it. Like at the end of a show, you could turn around and go, I didn't even know what I just did during that 2 hours or whatever. For me, it was standing there in the end, I was like, this is what I want to do. I enjoy this. And then college, probably the point for me at college was for stage management was when I was doing the Scottish play. We had 2 versions of it. So one night, one show you'd be in one version and the next show it would be a different version. And I just remember the whole process of watching it happen and becoming friends with the cast. You create this relationship, you all kind of become like a family. No matter what show, whether you're doing a play, a musical, pantomime, you become like a family. It's kind of a bigger thing. You've not only got that pressure of doing good for yourself, but also for all of the cast, like making sure that all of the lights are on at the right time, the sound effects go at the right time. And so for me, doing those shows and then them switching as well, from one show you're doing it one version and the next you're doing a different version, I loved the thrill of doing that. And it was always, they always say the show must go on. You never know what's going to happen. And so if something happens, someone might come on late, a change might not happen. And so always having to think on the spot, you're never going to do the same show twice. Yeah. And that's what I enjoyed. I was like, this is what I want to do. And then also the audience reaction as well. When you see, especially when you're doing, so when I did a Santa show, you had all these kids in the audience and their reaction to the show, you were like, I'm part of this. You were giving these kids a link into an industry that you love, and for them then hopefully potentially to go, I want to do that when I'm older, whether they're on stage or backstage. For you to be sat there going, I was part of that, is just amazing.
There's no better example for me of a certain phrase than theatre or panto, and that is, teamwork makes the dream work.
Absolutely. It's always nice because you always have the cast members who understand how hard it is for stage management and the backstage team. And in some ways, you all know, the cast all know that the show won't happen without the backstage crew, and the backstage crew wouldn't happen without the cast. To make that experience, you need all aspects of it, and the respect that you get from everyone as well. It's just the teamwork. You become like a family. I will always say you're always a family.
Well, you've been part of the Imagine family since you saw that very first Belgrade panto all those years ago. But I think the other thing is, as far as an audience is concerned, they know that there are people backstage, but maybe don't appreciate what they do as much as the cast. And what a lot of London theatres have started doing is actually bringing the entire backstage team out for curtain calls, which I think is a great idea. Yeah. Let's talk about your training, Jazz, because you talked about going to college and uni. What did the training entail?
When I first started at college, like I said, we did a little bit of everything, looked into lighting, just very basic lighting, sound, set design, props, and through that we managed to get into a couple of little places. So we did our own pantomimes at the Drill Hall, which was incredible. Managed to be able to follow spot one of their pantomimes, which was just brilliant to kind of be able to be part of the panto that I first watched. It was a really nice full circle moment. And then I moved over to the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire to start my stage management training, and unfortunately at the beginning we were just hit with COVID, so the first year was a lot of sit on your bed and learn through the screen kind of situation. But as soon as we came out of COVID, it was you hit the ground running. Within our first year, you go round a rotation, so you start as an assistant stage manager, Your second year, you then are promoted and become the deputy stage manager. And then again in your third year, you become the stage manager of the show. And through my training, I managed to get a really good, well-rounded experience. You take on a role as a lighting operator, you take on your role as AV and projection operator and content creation. You then manage to get into having a look at how wardrobe works and how you would source a prop and things like that. And the shows we did at university were really good because you had lots of different styles. We'd do one musical, but then we'd do a Shakespeare production, and then we'd do a really nice periodic piece about Emily Bronte. So it was really good to have a really nice, well-rounded opportunity to be able to work with different directors within different spaces as well. Different theatrical spaces was really good because you start to learn that not every theatre is the same, and your job is a very adaptable job. You need to be able to kind of take things in your stride and just go with it and go, okay, that's not going to fit through the door. What are we going to do? So yeah, the training was great, and it allows you as well to find those little branches where you're like, okay, stage management is my thing, but I also have a really strong interest in special effects makeup. So I started kind of taking a little bit of an alternative route to kind of have a look at special effects on the side as well. So.
Yeah, and it's a good foundation. Unfortunately, it would probably be more hands-on if you hadn't had COVID, Absolutely. Which is a bit of a shame. But it gives you a good grounding. And I know that you both went to the same place because Ruth is wearing the sweatshirt to prove it, or the hoodie. But, I mean, it's a good grounding. And then you can find, you know, your particular area of interest. But even when you've got that, it's still good to be versatile, isn't it?
In first year for us was very different to what Jazmyne had. So for us, you kind of 2 weeks in, you did a training of how to pack a van, ratchet straps and knots. So that was on the Friday. You then packed this van, and then on Sunday morning you met that van with all the set and everything, and you were there in the theatre getting it all in. And so that was 2 weeks in. And 2 weeks in as a first year, and you're just there like, oh my word, what have I got myself into? But then again you just go, okay, what needs to happen? What are we doing? And you kind of had the second years and third years leading you as well, which was really nice because they understood that you didn't really know what was going on. But then, like we said, like you just took those, and then from them you kind of learned stuff that then you wanted to do. I obviously did stage management. I enjoyed doing the DSM role, but then I actually found my love for props. So props making, the aspect of paper props, and kind of having a bit of fun with that. I am known here for having fun with some of the paper props on stage. So even if there's things that audience might not notice, there's little Easter eggs in there for the cast members, which I do enjoy doing to make it a bit fun for them. So yeah, I kind of found that, which was really good for me because it meant that actually, if for some reason I couldn't get a DSM role, I had this additional skill somewhere else. And it's something that you can do anywhere. I mean, COVID was massive for the arts industry. It was so many people, obviously theatres closed, so there were so many people out of jobs. But then actually stage managers, there was a lot of us who could carry on doing other stuff because we had these management skills to be able to, I know that there's some people who actually went into COVID centres and ended up organising appointments and organising those vaccine centres as well. And so actually the skills that you learn, you can take anywhere. And if we wanted, with our degree, we could go into TV and film. And so actually, yes, okay, it's slightly different. Yes, okay, there's more detail that you probably need to be noticed of because they're actually filming up close as regards to audience probably being at least 10 metres away if you're at the back of a stage. So you don't have to go into that much detail. You're doing stuff at a bigger scale. But in film, obviously, there's that thing of making sure it's very realistic. You've got all those finer details in there because probably the camera's going to pick it up. So in some ways you can use it in that. So there are a lot of stage managers who have also gone into TV and film, and it's just your opportunities are endless.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are so many transferable skills, aren't there? So how did you come to Imagine, Jazz?
How did I come to Imagine? That's a great question. I did my first ever pantomime professional job at the Stafford Gatehouse Theatre with a different company to begin with, and it just so happened on Christmas Eve of that year I bumped into Ruth, and she happened to be backstage as well, and she was telling me how Imagine Theatre were then taking on the Gatehouse for another pantomime. So again, looked at the Imagine Theatre website, thought this is a little bit of me. I've always had a really strong interest in producing theatre, never had a massive interest in the commercial side of it. For me, it's the producing theatre and starting, seeing that whole process, all of the how do we get the money, how do we source the vans, all of that is really interesting to me, and creating a brand new show from scratch where you have no script at all and we create everything. That's always been kind of my big interest, really. So managed to secure myself the DSM role again with Imagine Theatre this year at the Gatehouse Theatre, and it just so happened that I think about 3 or 4 weeks after I'd graduated university, the role here opened up, and reading the job description I just went, that's a little bit of me. It uses those skills of me as a DSM. The logistical side of it, me being able to use spreadsheets the way I do, being able to utilise those skills that I have as a stage manager and put them into one of the biggest producers of pantomime, which is one of the most beautiful art forms I've ever witnessed. I just thought I've got to give it a try. So put my CV in, I got an interview, met with Sarah, and it was just the loveliest interview I've ever had. And that evening I got the call to say, you've got the job, do you want it? And I had 2 weeks to find somewhere, and now she's in Coventry.
Fabulous. So what does that job entail? What do you do?
So as the operations and productions assistant, I look at booking all of our cast and crew's accommodation. I help to organise things like all of our photo shoots, people's accommodation, their travel, the booking of any rehearsal spaces. I look at kind of costings and all of our budgets for any of our other shows and tours that we're looking at doing. I liaise with the venues to see what equipment they've got so that we can marry up what equipment of ours they need. I help with some of the recruitment side of things. It's a very, very versatile job. If Ruth needs a hand, I'll go out and help paint. Yesterday we were painting vegetables, weren't we?
Painting
vegetables in the sun. If it's needed, I'll go and help, with the maintenance of any of our carriages and our horses. It's such a versatile job, but that's what I love because, again, like theatre, every day is different. You don't know what you're going to get, and working in live theatre is just the best. And then to be able at the end of the year to see all of your hard work, sometimes my painted vegetable up on the stage or the button I helped costume sew on to somebody's jacket, that's just amazing to be able to say, okay, you can't 100% see everything I've done, but I know that I was a vital role to creating this panto. And I mean, we've got 19 pantomimes going out this year, so to be able to go and see them and go, I've been a part of that is stunning.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that you've mentioned there that people won't have any idea about.
Absolutely.
For instance, there may be a number of venues up and down the country that have got their own rehearsal spaces, but there are many that don't. You have to source them, pay for them, hire them. You have to make sure they're adequate in terms of size and so on. A lot of people don't even think about that. So tell us about your job, Ruth, apart from painting vegetables.
I am deputy head of props, so the head of department is 3 days a week. So she does Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, which means then Tuesday and Friday I'm basically her. But mostly I'm upstairs either doing maintenance on props, whether that's re-gluing, repainting, mostly re-glittering, lot of glitter. Constantly covered in glitter I am. But yeah, it's a lot of maintenance on the prop. Sometimes there's a lot of reading scripts, so whenever a script comes in, I have to read through all of those 19 scripts that we have. You read every single one of them, which then also you've got different drafts of them, so you're probably reading like 2 or 3 of the same script for one venue, which has slight changes. So I have to read those, create a props list, which then is a guide for us of knowing, right, okay, what are we sending, what do we need to get ready, what is there that needs buying, needs painting, needs making, which is a lot of fun. Every day for me is very different. I'm also in control of the slosh kit, so all of the slosh.
You're the one to blame.
Yeah, so all of the slosh that is in our shows, I have to count all the sticks to make sure we've got them. I have to make sure the instructions are still relevant for our ASMs. All of our kits have everything in them to make the slosh. Slosh to make is actually quite easy. You can just make it. The amount of times when we've made it here, there has been moments where I've had to make slosh here to test if something's going to work. Yeah. So there was a routine that we had, I think,
it's easy to make, but it's not easy to make well.
No, it's not. There's a real skill to make.
And there are so many things you have no control over. Let me tell you, like the temperature of the room that can change, so it could go really watery. Yes. We ought to explain that, a lot of people who go and see a panto might think that the slosh or custard pies or whatever are just shaving foam sprayed onto a plate.
I wish. So actually it's a shaving stick, and basically what you have to do is you have to grate the stick down. So it is a shaving foam, but it's like soap. So it's in a soap stick. First of all, you shave it down, you boil 2 kettles, 2 sticks per show. So you grate it down. You then have a slosh trug, which basically is just a big plastic pot planter. The only way I can describe it. Or you can use a plastic bin. I know the Belgrade use a bin. And you put the grated in. You then put the hot water in, and then you just mix it. So we have an electric mixer with a plaster mix on it, and you mix it together until you've kind of got this really foamy consistency. But like you say, it's all about the temperature as well. So there's a certain time that you have to make it before the show.
I was going to say, you can make it too early, you can make it too late. I mean, this is a science in itself.
Yeah, and then we've got slosh syringes. So then when you bring the slosh syringes into it, again, there's another consistency, because if you put it in the syringes too early, it just kind of goes really watery and just dribbles out. Or it won't have, like, if you again do the too thick, it won't come out how you want it. So then you've really got to time it well of when you make the actual slosh, but then when you put it into the places where it needs to be. So either on the flam bases, which are just cake bases, which are latexed to make it easier to clean, or when you put it in the slosh syringes, which are actually just plumbing pipe. Like, it's a drainage pipe with a nozzle on the end and then a plunger, and that is your basic slosh syringe. So there's a lot of working it out, and then when you have a new slosh scene, it's down to me to work out how it works, how you're going to do it. So we had a scene with a radio and mozzarella balls, which was balloons. So then it was working out how to make that balloon pop when you need it to, working out the consistency of how to actually fill the balloon, because slosh is actually quite airy. So when you try and put that in a balloon, it doesn't expand how it should. So there was a lot of experimenting with that going on, which got very messy. And then also knowing how much you needed to fill the balloon, how the pressure that needed to be able to pop it. So if you needed to use water balloons or normal balloons. And so it's the stuff like that. So that then when you go into rehearsal, you've then got the cast not having to work out, well, okay, how are we going to do this whole slosh scene? We've kind of done the hard work of it. They just then have to recreate it. And so we just write instructions, making sure that they're easy for people to do. There's been times as well, there's videos of me making these balloons up. There's videos of me doing random stuff to show people this is how you do it, so that then they can recreate it actually in that rehearsal room.
That's key as well, because there'll be a lot of people with a lot of theatre experience working backstage in a venue who may never have done panto before. You can't be at every venue making the slosh. So they have to be trained, of course. This year is another big year, 19 pantos you mentioned, plus the Santa shows as well, Jazz. But long term, what do you see yourself doing career-wise? Do you see yourself as a producer eventually?
Long term, that's absolutely what I want to do, yeah. If I could have Sarah's job here and now, I would absolutely take it. Yeah, long term, it would be being either a company manager within a theatre production and touring the UK, potentially the world if possible. But the big goal, the big dream ultimately is to be a producer.
But as you move up the ladder, it's only experience that helps you move up, isn't it?
I'm in such a lucky position that I'm surrounded by so many other people who have that experience. Sarah and Steve as CEOs are absolutely incredible. They will always, where possible, get me in on meetings and, just let me know how things are working as a business, because I would never know from being at university about how a business runs itself. things like the overheads. I didn't know you had to pay for bins to be taken out. Things like that, all of those little things that you just don't know until you are working within a business, within a kind of producing company. You just don't know. So I'm really, really lucky that I'm surrounded by so many brilliant APs. We've got a great artistic director, all of these different people, and I mean, going to see so many productions, meeting so many of the freelancers, it's a great way to network as well and find those contacts and learn. I'm basically being a sponge and just soaking up as much of information as I can, and the only way I can climb that ladder, as you say, is to learn all of this information and get more experience, keep sending out all of these pantomimes and start climbing that ladder.
You have to be a big kid as well, Ruth. You really do, because
Yes.
how many pantos did you see last year?
I saw quite a lot last year. Me and probably about half of our pantos last year. Me and Roz, who is the head of our department. So we went out and saw all the shows, as many as we could, to kind of meet the people who we had interviewed, because we had interviewed them over Zoom calls. So it was really nice to go and see the shows and see how the routines also work. So if you had a new routine in, we could look at it and go, this is how it works. So yeah, I saw High Wycombe, Reading, Stafford, saw the Belgrade. I went everywhere. It was great. And the reaction as well from the kids. You're sat there in the audience with all of the families, and they have no idea that you've had an input in that show, which I always think is really funny. It was one of those, and when you see those kids shouting and enjoying, you kind of go, I'm actually part of a bigger thing. Like, so Reading had, I don't know how many people saw it last year, but they had a Portaloo time machine, because it was a Portaloo, it was called the TARDIS. So we had a sign made that went from TARDIS, and when you pulled a fishing wire in it, it was all with magnets, little secrets there, it changed to TARDIS. And so when this machine came out, everyone just burst out into laughter. And the amount of work that went into that here was insane. The amount of that we were like, right, okay, how are we going to get this to the venue without it being damaged from all the stuff we put on it? And so actually taking, I know it had like pipe ducting on it, it had random wires, we had a flush capacitor made, which was just LED strip light, all of that random stuff which we made here, and then working out how to get that to the venue. There's so much that goes into it, and as soon as that came on stage, everyone just burst out laughing, because what they saw was a time machine Portaloo, but what I saw was a thing that took a lot of work, and actually it looked really good. We absolutely smashed that criteria.
Well, the great thing about that is I like the fact that you get your own gags in shows as well, through props and scenery. And so when you go and see an Imagine Panto this Christmas, look out for any Easter eggs and look out for things like that, and just give some credit to the people who work tirelessly behind the scenes every year to put that together. I can see you both love your jobs. It's been great talking to you. Jazz and Ruth, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, before we finish, another of your questions, and this time it's one for Imagine's artistic director, Eric Potts. And the question is, what makes a perfect panto comedy routine?
The thing about traditional pantomime routines is a lot of them were based on old vaudevillian acts, old musical acts. So the actual structure aren't new, really, for the bulk of them. I'm talking about things like 12 Days of Christmas routine, If I Were Not Upon the Stage routine. A lot of the slosh and slapstick routines are based on old performers and how they performed these particular routines back in the day. They have to be fast. The thing about these routines, a lot of them are based on rhythm, and the audience love to know how that's going to work. In the rhythm is what makes it funny. So if you have a particular comedian or a member of the cast who thinks they can mess around with the basic structure, it very often doesn't work. There are moments to allow particular cast members to really enjoy the routine and exploit the enjoyment of the audience within that routine, but a lot of them are based on rhythm and repetition, and that's what the audience really enjoy, because they are almost allowed to become one beat ahead of the cast and know what's coming next. Various other routines, the slosh Ideally, the messier it is, the better, as long as you can contain it on the stage and not cause too many problems, costume-wise and indeed sound-wise. Slosh into radio mics is a regular problem these days, but there are ways around that. So it's about just making as much mess in those scenes as you can get away with. That's where the real laughter and the real comedy is. Just remember to close your eyes, because that stuff really stings if it gets in your eyes. The ghost gag is another very popular pantomime routine, with the ghost coming on, allowing, of course, lots of screaming opportunities for the audience and the children therein. It's behind you. What was it? It was a ghost. It's a great chance for the audience to really let off steam. And again, they love knowing more than us on stage do. They love being able to tell us, and then we argue and say, no, it wasn't. They say, yes, it was. It's a real moment when they can get involved in the story and have some really good fun as well. So I think the main points about a successful traditional pantomime routine are being truthful to the routine, trusting it rather than trying to mess around with it, and making it as accessible to the audience as possible. They have to be let in. And if something goes wrong and the cast start laughing, they must know why the cast are laughing. They mustn't be questioning what's going on. As I always say, an audience are the last member of a pantomime cast, and that is never truer than in a traditional pantomime routine.
Thanks, Eric, and that's it for another episode, I'm afraid. Don't forget to keep your questions about Imagine Theatre or pantomime in general coming in via the website at imaginetheatre.co.uk. Just go to the Get in Touch section and make sure you subscribe through your favourite podcast app, and join me, Martin Ballard, next time for episode 80, when I'll be joined by Imagine's Deputy Head of Wardrobe, Adam Brooks, to talk about his route into theatre from performer to cruise director, Great British Sewing Bee to Imagine.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.